Aloha, folks, and welcome to this latest edition of Five Questions, a conversation that appears here on the Rick Hamada program, and also you can log on to hawaiireporter.com and find Five Questions there as well. We are delighted to welcome to this edition Mr. Andrew Campanella, of course, National Director of Communications for the American Federation for Children. He's also a policy analyst for the education reform movement. And it's a pleasure to have Andrew back with us. Aloha, sir. How are you?
Aloha. Thanks, Rick.
Well, the format's pretty straightforward. It's 5 questions. We always like to start with question number 1 being, if you could tell us about yourself and also about AFC, please.
Sure. I've been involved in education reform for about a decade now. And the reason I got involved, and the job I had before this was in the amusement park industry, doing public relations for them, if you can believe that. That was a lot of fun, was because on the side I was volunteering with D.C. school kids who were seniors in high school, and they were going through a civics education program. And so many of these kids that I volunteered with, I found couldn't put together a sentence, let alone a paragraph. And when I talked to them, some of them told me things that shocked me. That they went to public schools and they never had a teacher who stayed a full year. From kindergarten through 12th grade, kids who had never had a teacher who had stayed the whole time.
Wow.
So I said, you know what? This education crisis that I hear about on the cable news and on talk radio, it's actually real. And this is something that I could get behind, trying to fix this problem. So I started working for an organization that helped recruit and certify professionals to become teachers. And when I was doing that, I realized that I would go to state house after state house and sit down and meet with legislators and testify before committees about this great alternative certification program that would bring CFOs and bankers in to become math teachers and astronauts to become science teachers. And the only voice of opposition to this program was the teachers' unions. They would oppose it every step of the way, to the point where it became almost tragically comical that they would sit in the back of a hearing and just pop up and say no. So it was almost like a game of whack-a-mole. And I eventually then got involved in school choice, working to provide vouchers and scholarship tax credit programs to children who are disadvantaged across the country, and again, found that the majority of the American public and even teachers themselves support these programs, but entrenched special interests do not. So I am a true believer in this work. I've seen the need for it, and I've seen the benefits of it, and that's why I'm so passionate about education reform.
Tell us about American Federation for Children, the organization, and by extension, the education reform movement, too, please.
Well, the American Federation for Children is the nation's voice for school choice. What we do is we lobby for the passage of school voucher programs and scholarship tax credit programs in state legislatures across the country. A lot of people think that the big decisions about education are made at the federal level, but in reality, state legislatures have more impact over the education of an individual child than does the entire United States Congress or the president. So we focus our efforts on lobbying and advocating in the states. And what we want is we want a system where parents aren't forced to send their kids to a traditional public school simply because they live in a certain zip code. It's fundamentally unfair, if you think about it, that just because you might live in one economically disadvantaged zip code, your child will have to go to a school that's failing, that doesn't produce graduates year after year after year. We think that there are a ton of great private schools out there. We should provide access to those private schools for low-income and middle-income kids using school vouchers, which is basically an individual taxpayer's dollars being used to help his or her child go to the school of their choice, or scholarship tax credit programs. And the way a program like that would work is a corporation would donate money to help provide a scholarship for a kid to go to a private school. And as a result, the corporation would get a credit off of their state income taxes. There's also charter schools, magnet schools, homeschooling, virtual schools, any number of options. But the most important thing is the parent should have a menu of options, a choice about where to send their kids to school. That's the most important thing we can do to fix the quality of education in our country today. So that's school choice, that's AFC. The education reform movement in general has a lot of different components. You have school choice, you have teacher quality reforms trying to pay great teachers more money, You have the fight to increase standards to make sure that, we're not just passing everyone through social promotion, but the kids are actually challenged to learn. And then you have a lot of different types of smaller reforms that get involved in everything from, the way school buildings are financed to, whether or not there should be certain types of curriculum in schools.
Very well put. Deeply appreciate that, Andrew. That'll lead us to the logical number 2 question, and that is your assessment of not only our education system in America, but through your due diligence, how about the assessment of the education system here in Hawaii?
Well, across the country, it's pretty devastating. We're in a global race for jobs. We talk every day, and I'm sure your listeners here on your station every single day about the fact that we are in an unending recession. We're hemorrhaging jobs in our country, and corporations are struggling to not only make a profit and keep people, but also to look for qualified workers who can do the important work that needs to be done in companies across the country. So we're in a situation right now where we have not only a bad economy, but to match that, we have a dismal education system, and that's pretty much the worst situation you could be in. And just to give you some context, every 26 seconds, another child drops out of an American public school. And the cost of high school dropouts, just 1 year of dropouts, is the equivalent of more than $1 trillion. That $1 trillion could be an immediate tax-free stimulus for our country if only we could increase the graduation rates in schools across the country. It's very difficult to identify what particularly has caused the problems in our schools, but I think it's an example of benign neglect. For too long, our parents and grandparents went to public schools that we thought were doing well, and back when most things were made in America and a lot of our industry was based here, that was fine. People could go to any number of different careers and be fine with the education they were getting. But right now, people are competing for highly technical professional jobs in a global economy, and kids in 35 other countries are outpacing students here in America. So that puts us in a really strategic disadvantage when it comes to the global economy and when it comes to individual communities. We talk about Hawaii, we're talking about a graduation rate that's only 65%. So 35% of kids are not graduating at all. And we're talking about a situation where less than a quarter of low-income kids in Hawaii are proficient in reading. Reading is the benchmark, the stepping stone to all other subjects. So if your child can't read at a proficient level, how can you expect them to do algebra? How can you expect them to write? How can you expect them to do science? So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we have a lot of work to do.
We're talking with Andrew Campanella. And Andrew, remind us, how can we contact you and learn more about American Federation for Children?
2 ways. Go to federationforchildren.org. That's federationforchildren.org. We'd also love it if you would fan us on Facebook, and that's facebook.com/schoolchoicenow. School Choice Now. And if you want to email me, I'm acampanella@federationforchildren.org.
Question number 3, success stories. Washington, D.C. has been always noted to have executed successfully a school voucher program despite pretty remarkable opposition and threat to that program. Describe what happens in Washington, D.C. What was the condition of the education system there before, and how has the school voucher system been implemented to where it's been so successful?
That is a great question, and I'm glad you asked it because I've worked with kids who are involved in the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, and I have seen the transformational impact of school vouchers on kids in D.C., kids who come from extremely poor families, a level of poverty that before I worked in this movement I never really comprehended. What the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program allows people to do is it allows very low-income families to access some federal dollars to use a voucher and send their child to a private school. So this means that some kids in D.C. whose parents make $12,000 a year or maybe less are able to go to Sidwell Friends. They're able to go to Georgetown Day, some of the best schools in this country. Mm-hmm. And what we're finding is that when parents are utilizing these vouchers and sending their kids to these great private schools, the results are absolutely stunning. When kids go into voucher programs in the beginning, it's very difficult for them because they're going from an environment where they're not used to being challenged, they're not used to being stimulated, they're not used to really learning much, to an environment where their peers at their same grade level are learning maybe 3 or 4 grade levels higher than them. But what we find is that over time, these students excel extraordinarily. And 91% of kids in the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program are graduating from high school, and many of those who graduate are going on to college. Compare that to the DC public school system, where the graduation rate is in the 60s, same as where Hawaii is, 65%. 91%, the voucher program costs less money than traditional public schools, and it's a phenomenal success. And this compared to, or this in combination with charter schools in the district have really revolutionized education here, and we are now a catalyst for reform.
You know, it's very heartening to hear the accomplishments and especially the elevation of these kids from an education standpoint. You did mention low income, and just as a follow up on this, is there any consideration for those parents who may not fall under low income, maybe even middle income? And I'll give an example here in Hawaii, where we have an estimated cost of about $19,000 plus per public school student. There are many of us that are in a situation where we would like to send our children to a school that we determine, but we're unable to because we have the rest of life that we have to pay for in a very expensive and very heavily taxed and regulated environment. Is there any consideration for us that parents that may not be determined as low income but maybe middle income, that we could take advantage of a system like this?
Absolutely, and the best place to look as an example for a program that serves low and middle income families is in Indiana. Governor Daniels just signed a few months ago a transformational school voucher program that actually has the ability to impact up to, I think, 300,000 or 600,000 kids. And in just a month, they only had a month to implement this after the legislature passed this voucher program for low and middle income kids, and the governor signed the bill. 4,000 kids are already in the schools of their parents' choice.
Wow.
And the income limits on that program are significantly higher. And there are benefits to this. Number one, that increases competition and allows more people to, or more schools to begin competing for students. One of the things we heard in Indiana was that public schools were now starting to form committees to improve themselves so that they wouldn't lose so many kids from the voucher program. So I have to tell you, Rick, when I hear union arguments, teachers' union arguments against voucher programs, one of the first things they always say is competition doesn't work. It's totally wrong to make our schools compete. There's no place for competition in public education. And then as soon as a voucher program gets passed, you see competition work in a healthy way for kids. And I've got 3 good examples for you. In Washington, D.C., 28% of underperforming public schools reported innovating and improving as a direct result of the voucher program. So success story number 1. In Ohio, schools are working diligently to recruit kids back who are in the Ed Choice voucher program to the public school system. Third, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there are signs, billboards outside of public schools with scores, student scores, promoting the efficacy, the effectiveness of those schools to keep kids from leaving and to keep kids, and to bring back, rather, kids who have gone to private schools. In Arizona, you have public schools going door to door, giving out flyers talking about the academic improvements they're making to keep kids from going into the tax credit program. And now in Indiana, schools are passing or creating task forces to improve their academics and their curriculum to keep kids. So I don't know where the argument that competition doesn't work is coming from, because it's working all across the country.
It is remarkably, and on top of that, it brings optimism to those of us that have always thought in the environment in which we live, in the state that we're in, that this would never, ever happen. Maybe at some point, this gives a glimmer of hope. The other part, too, is in question number 4, Andrew, deals with, you mentioned before, and quite accurately, the most influence is exerted by local school boards and local districts, et cetera. However, federal initiatives such as No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, but especially No Child, has come under a lot of fire. And I hear on our program that No Child is responsible for mitigating progress in our public schools rather than assisting. Can you give us your commentary, one, on federal involvement in local school issues, and second of all, the effectiveness of programs like No Child?
Well, let me give you some general perspective.
Sure.
Our organization doesn't take an official position on specific aspects of No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top, but I'll speak generally, personally, from an education reformer's perspective, that there are definitely some benefits to No Child Left Behind. And the benefits are that we finally, for the first time in a long time, have been able to see exactly how schools are performing. I think that people who oppose No Child Left Behind fall into two camps. The first camp is a group of people who truly and honestly believe that educational decisions should be made at the local and state levels. And I sympathize completely with those folks. The second group of people are folks who don't like No Child Left Behind because they don't like the sunlight and the transparency that it is shining on the failures of many of our school systems. So if people want to argue that No Child Left Behind is hurting progress, I would disagree in the sense that it is giving us a glimpse into some of the failures of our public school system while providing an idea for a path forward. I would also say, though, that federal mandates, top-down command and control federal mandates from the U.S. Department of Education or Congress is not the best way to go about educating kids. After all, we do support the idea that bureaucrats at any level should not be making decisions about where kids go to school, but parents should be making those decisions. But at the same time, we need to be seeing how schools are doing so parents can make decisions based on data and results. So it's a mixed bag. Now, on to Race to the Top, which is President Obama's $4.3 billion initiative providing funds to states and school districts that meet certain criteria. This has been championed by a lot of reformers as the next best thing. I am skeptical, and the reason I'm skeptical about Race to the Top is because out of 500 or so points that you can get, the state can get for Race to the Top, only 40 points are for charter schools. More points are allocated to whether or not a union stamps and likes the plan than the state gets for charter schools. So I think that the formula is a little screwed up, and I also think that they should be giving states some credit for having a private school choice program, a tax credit program, or a voucher program.
Right.
But it's definitely a step in the right direction. Encouraging states to do reform, encouraging states to to pass reforms for teacher quality, things like that. They're a good thing, but it's not the best thing in the entire world. It's not something that is going to save us all. People need to realize that. No Child Left Behind didn't do that. Race to the Top won't do that. The only thing that'll do it is state-based reforms that put parents in charge.
Andrew Campanella is our guest for this edition of 5 Questions, National Director of Communications, American Federation for Children, also serving as a policy analyst for the education reform movement. And that leads us to our final question for you, Andrew, and it's more forward than anything else, and it has to be about the future of our education system for our kids. If we take a look at the debate that's taking place politically, it's dominated by the economy, understandably so. I don't recall really in some of the GOP debates specifically where education was a profound and precise priority. Seems to be dominated by the economy, and there we have it. For our future of public education, what do you see, and what role would the next president of the United States have in meeting the objective that perhaps you'd like to have?
The next president of the United States needs to use his or her bully pulpit to go out and rally states and encourage them to pursue reforms that put kids first. And that means encourage states to pass voucher programs, encourage states to pass tax credit programs, encourage states to increase the amount of charter schools they authorize, encourage states to pass teacher quality reforms that put good teachers first. The president needs to stand up and say that he is on the side of families and special interests don't get an audience with him or her, depending on who the president is, or if we keep the same president. And I will give a lot of credit to President Obama, because President Obama, as much as I may disagree with him on things and as much as I'm skeptical about Race to the Top in some regards, I think he has stood up to some degree to the teachers' unions, and he has said, you know what, when it comes to performance pay, when it comes to merit pay, and when it comes to contracts, you and I may differ. We have not seen a Democratic president ever do that. So he gets credit for that. but we have yet to see a president use his or her bully pulpit to stand up and say, school choice is the future. We must compete in a global economy. The only way we can compete in this global economy is if we move our kids up from 35th place in the world in math and literacy to number one again. Mm-hmm. That is the path to prosperity for our country, and that's what our next president needs to say.
Best way to get a hold of you to learn more about American Federation for Children, Andrew?
Sure, federationforchildren.org. I urge everybody, please join the fight for school choice. Even if it seems like it's never going to happen in Hawaii, if you fight for it, if you advocate for it, if you contact your legislators, it might. And also go to facebook.com/schoolchoicenow.
This, as always, has been a remarkable conversation. I thank you very much for your passion and willingness to come on with us. This could possibly be the catalyst that will, find reformations here in Hawaii, ideally of what we're seeing elsewhere. That would be a dream fulfilled, my friend, believe me. Thanks so very much. Thank you so very much. I hope we can do it again.
Same here. Thanks so much.
Okay, all the best. Bye now.
You too. Bye.